Welcome everyone to our Farm Country Update today. We're excited to have you as we really explore farmer expectations for the 2022 planting season. As we head into this season, there's a lot of challenges. Yeah, commodity prices are better than what we saw a couple of years ago. But when you look at the input challenges, when you look at Mother Nature, there's just a lot of uncertainty heading into the 2022 year. And so that's exactly what we're going to explore today. We're going to hear from three farmers who really can give perspective with boots on the ground, kind of what their plans are for 2022, just a day before USDA releases their big acreage report tomorrow. My name is Tyne Morgan, host of US Farm Report, a weekly television show, and I'm excited to moderate the discussion today. And that discussion happens with three farmers from across the country. So we're really expanding our geography today. We have Matt Bennett of Windsor, Illinois. He's a farmer, but he's also a grain market analyst with agmarket.net. So we'll have both of those perspectives today. We have April Hennis of Hampton, Iowa, as well as Brittan Gruhlkey of Wildorado, Texas. So that Texas Panhandle area, an area that is extremely dry, whereas Matt Bennett, extremely wet in the Eastern Corn Belt, and April kind of caught right there in the middle. And so as we look at the different challenges of Mother Nature and how that's impacting decisions, definitely will be a good discussion today. So to kick it off, Matt, I will start with you. I know you said you're getting rain right now, but as you head into this 2022 planting season, what are your acreage plans?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think here's the thing. Last fall, coming into harvest, we had the opportunity to book prepay levels for fertilizer. And so those levels, a lot of folks were balking at them, of course, but I just had a feeling based upon the direction of the commodity markets that there was probably more reason to get those locked in than not. So we were able to purchase all the fertilizer that we had been planning for. And it just so happens that we're heavy corn this year, Tyne, but it's not necessarily because we don't have any corn on corn. I will say that. It's just a matter of we've done some tiling over the last 2 or 3 years. We had considered not going so heavy corn, but getting those inputs bought at the time that we did, I guess, encouraged us, especially with the direction of the corn market, that we're going to go ahead and stay with that heavy corn mix. So we're going to stay with switching corn to beans, beans to corn. We're all corn and beans in this part of the world, and we're pretty happy with the way that that's all manifested. Now, there's a couple of farms that we couldn't put anhydrous on early, and so we just decided we're going to go ahead and bite the bullet and pay the big cost. We did lock that in January, I believe, for a shade over $1,500, and it's gone up quite a bit since then in my part of the world. But we're going to go ahead and do that. And we felt like we kind of averaged that out, and given our input costs being lower on the other acres, it was going to work out for us pretty good.
Well, before we head over to April to get her thoughts on our acreage mix this year, don't forget, we want this to be a conversation. So at the bottom right hand of the screen, you'll see the Q&A. Go ahead. As soon as a question pops up, go ahead and get that in, and we will make sure to ask that in the conversation as we move forward. But April, in your area, kind of like Matt, mainly corn and soybean country. So what is the mix going to be for you this year?
Yeah, mine is, I'm going to leave it the same too. I'm corn and soybeans. We do a lot of corn on corn in my area. So like Matt, I pre-booked my nitrogen, but I left one field. Maybe I'll go corn on corn. And I just called to see, number one, if I could get the nitrogen. I do liquid nitrogen. They put it on with my burn down. And if I could get it and how much it was. Well, I paid 30 cents a unit, for the last year's. This year I booked in August and it was 64 cents, and now it's over $1. So it's gone up that much. And to do corn on that field, it would be $240 an acre just for the nitrogen. And so I go, I'm gonna have to get a pencil to this. And you know what? It's still paid, not by much, to do corn on corn rather than corn on beans, but very little. So I'll probably just switch it to soybeans, because I'll be heavier soybeans. I'm like Matt, I'm just kind of the opposite way. So I'm going to leave it. Everyone I've talked to up here is sticking with their rotation. And the guys that were corn on corn that switched to beans like last year went, whoa, you can get 80 bushel an acre plus soybeans, after corn so long. So now they're finding out, well, beans aren't so bad. So in my area, input, it's all about managing those margins and the input costs. But most everyone I've talked to is staying with the same rotation. But we're going into it's dry here. Not as bad as Mr. Texas there, but pretty dry.
Before we do go on to Mr. Texas, who has a few different options and definitely
Yes.
drought weighing on his mind, a question did come in, and Matt and April, I'll let you go ahead and answer this. Do you switch each year? One year, do you do corn in one field and soybeans the next year in the same field? So when you talk about your rotation, what is your typical rotation?
Yeah, mine's corn, soybean rotation, but I may do a field 3 years corn and then go back to soybeans. So I can do corn on corn very easily. Just depend.
We can do corn on corn pretty easily as well. I'd say during the ethanol boom, if you will, when corn was skyrocketing, we had a lot of corn on corn for several years in a row. But quite frankly, a couple of years, it bit us firmly in the rear end, especially as bean prices started increasing. We decided, you know what, it just works better on our farm to go corn to beans, beans to corn. And so I would say most of the people in our area are pretty heavily corn to beans, beans to corn.
And another question that just came in before I get to Brittan, is it better for the field to switch back and forth? So when you look at soil health and you look at some of that, is that one of the reasons that you maintain that rotation?
That's my main reason. Your input costs are a lot lower with soybeans, and I hate corn on corn. So that's just me. So, you're getting the less yields. The longer you do it, they say you can get the better yields, but I just don't like managing corn on corn. And I think it's better for soil health too.
I agree. I think it's better for soil health. I think if you have a good dry fall where you can do a lot of tillage, it's really hard to do corn on corn, quite frankly, with a minimum till system. So that's something people have to understand. You can do it, but you certainly have to have the right type of equipment. For us personally, our best experience with corn on corn has been whenever we can get out and work ground as soon as we're able to harvest, give it a chance to settle, give it obviously, be in a situation where we can get anhydrous on even in the fall. That has been our best experience with corn on corn, because as it rains today here in central Illinois, I can tell you anybody who was hoping to put anhydrous on early is starting to lose hope in that, because now you're going to be in a situation where you want to plant corn, but you really ought to be putting the anhydrous on and then waiting a few days. And sometimes that just doesn't work. So corn to beans, beans to corn, in my opinion, works best. It's been best for the ground for us in our experience. And it just, the flow of it, I think, is something that we're probably not going to go away from anytime soon.
Now we're going to switch to another extreme, because Brittan, Matt said a good dry fall. And I know there's been nothing good about this fall or winter. The latest data shows that your area of the panhandle of Texas just experienced the driest winter on record. So before we get into the acreage picture, you paint the picture for us, Brittan. How dry and dire is it where you are?
Well, I like to stay pretty positive, but it's getting pretty serious. Lot of dust in the air these days. We're having some pretty big wind events coming through, which is pretty typical this time. But whenever you mix the dry on top of it, you get a lot of dirt blowing in the air. Lots of guys are being forced to do some tillage that they necessarily wouldn't be doing if we had some cover and things like that. And then we're seeing a lot of wildfires in the grasslands and stuff as well. So it's like I say, it's the driest it's ever been, I think, at least in my memory. I know for sure. It's flirting with that 2011-12 that we experienced. So yeah, it's time for a change for sure.
Well, and I was just about to ask you that, because when you look at, that 2011, 2012 timeframe, Brittan, I mean, that was the heat of the summer where, I remember the pivots couldn't even make it a full circle without the corn dying. I mean, irrigated acres were not able to withstand those 100-degree temperatures, the dryness and the wind. But that was the height of the growing season. Was it that dry heading into the growing season then?
No, not like it is right now. We were in a little better shape, whenever we started, and then whenever the summer kicked in and June, July showed up, there was just, it took it from there. But we're going to need some help here, or we're going to start in a worse position than we did in those years for sure.
So then, Brittan, before I ask you kind of what your acreage mix is going to be this year, when you look at how dry it is, how big of a factor is Mother Nature this year in what you actually think you're going to plant?
It's going to be a big factor. I think a lot of guys, they'll try to stick with as much rotation and do what they normally do, but there's definitely going to be a push if we continue to stay drier. I think a lot of additional dryland cotton acres will get planted just because of the insurance levels, and so you'll see a little bit of that. We're in a pretty high feed demand, feed yards and dairies, as we stay dry. They're having to bid for feed and continue to buy that. But on the flip side, it's dry, so farmers aren't going to grow as much. So it's going to kind of determine on your area what your market is, I think. But for the most part, I think guys will, where they're in a high feed demand, they'll stick to your corn and your sorghums, stuff like that for feed. And the further you get away from those markets, I think cotton will definitely be a bigger player.
Brittan, when you look at a crop like cotton, you have commodity prices the highest since 2011. Yet at the same time, it's a very input intensive crop. I mean, you look at corn and we're looking at nitrogen prices and things, but when you look at cotton, there's a lot of inputs that go into that crop. Do you think that causes some producers to shy away from planting cotton? I mean, especially farther south of you, where you're looking at the largest cotton patch in the US.
Mm-hmm. I don't think they'll switch from planting. I think the biggest thing is production could potentially be down because they'll plant it, but they may not put the inputs in like you would if you were wet and going in with a little bit of profile and had some moisture. So I think guys will still plant. It's just from a production side, we could see a little bit of decrease in yield just if, because guys probably aren't going to spend the money on the fertilizer and stuff like that, being as dry as we are.
Well, Matt, when you look at what Brittan had said, sorghum, Farmers Business Network, FBN, they just came out with their acreage survey earlier this week. I know you've had you came out with acreage numbers too with agmarket.net, but real quick, corn, they think it'll actually be down from 2021. So 2021, we were looking at 93.4 million. Their survey found 91.1 million this year. Soybeans, actually, they're looking at farmers planting 2 million more acres of soybeans. Sorghum actually down a little bit from last year. So they're looking at 7 million acres of sorghum. And then cotton, they actually think we'll see more than 1 million more acres of cotton this year. When you look at those numbers, which was a grower survey, a farmer member survey, how does that compare to where your acreage numbers are heading into tomorrow's USDA report, Matt?
Actually, they're fairly close. So as I with my team started to dissect this, a lot of it had to do with, we deal with growers in every state essentially that we plant corn. And so, I guess we talked to a lot of our producers. I would say it's a survey-based approach, but it was more of a one-on-one talk approach. We've got a lot of consulting customers as well, where we actually go all the way through everything they do from a financial standpoint, looking at what it costs them to put a crop out. And so, yes, USDA has already said that wheat acres is going to be up a couple million. We all knew cotton would be up at least some, but our thought process is 300,000 to 500,000 acres based upon the fact the National Cotton Council said that was what their survey was showing. So we're just trying to kind of watch and see what they said. And then so you got to ask yourself, you're going to still have that 180 mix that you had last year because you had 93 and change on corn and 87 and change on beans. I guess my personal opinion is whenever the prices show up, the acres show up. And so you've got big prices. And I've got to assume that even though wheat acres are up, cotton acres are up, sorghum, you name it, everyone's wanting the acres. I've got to think corn and beans combined are still in that camp where you're going to have 180 plus. And so, in fact, our numbers are fairly close to FBN. I mean, we came in with 90.7 for corn. So yes, we're down. But you got to consider those folks that like April was talking about, hey, I didn't get my nitrogen on. I thought I was going to get relief. I thought it was going to back off. Well, it's been incessantly moving higher. And so if you didn't get the nitrogen on and you're staring 1450 plus beans in the face, it's a fairly easy decision, I think, especially where production doesn't allow you to have the kind of APH that you need to really feel good about throwing $1,000 an acre into a corn crop. So our bean acres actually are a little higher than theirs at 89.8. And so the distinction I want to point out is that we're within 1 million acres, corn and beans. Last year, we were pushing 6 million. We feel like the corn and bean disparity is actually going to be much closer this year. We feel like fertilizers got a lot to do with it. Yes, corn prices are high, but this is supposed to be as of March 1st. This is going to be an interesting report tomorrow, because if you look and see what corn has done versus what beans have done in the month of March, corn has been way more impressive. You're looking at 75, 80 cents above your spring insurance price already for corn, whereas beans isn't even up that much above their spring insurance price. So corn has worked overtime in the month of March to get acres. But I think as of March 1st, my opinion is that corn and bean acres are going to be significantly closer than what they were a year ago.
But, April, when hearing from all of you, it's not like you've changed your acres based on price. I mean, you're sticking with your rotation. So, I understand that there's a lot that has changed, Matt, since March 1, but April, for the average farmer, is price something that does end up changing your acreage mix?
Well, and that's what it's funny Matt said that, because when I was talking to my extension guy and he kept going, but look at the insurance price. And I said, I've never collected on insurance, only once in 37 years farming. No, I'm looking at my net profit per acre. And by the way, I did get my nitrogen paid for, Matt, when it was cheap. So just the one field I didn't, but there are a lot of guys out there. I talked to some seed guys and they said they are selling more beans, but not a lot. So, when I hear that, more beans, but yet you're right, the change, we're not seeing the change, but who knows what the spring will bring. Hopefully Mr. Texas and I will get a lot of rain and we'll be very happy going into planting. And then we'll vie with Matt for yields. So
yeah, Brett, is it possible that it's too dry to plant in some areas?
Yeah, if it continues, I mean, that's definitely a possibility. I know you get into like southeastern Colorado, places like that, which really it's only about 2 hours from here. Those guys are probably staring down the barrel of that if it continues like it is. So yeah, there's always that possibility out there.
Well, and Tyne,
go ahead.
Another thing that I wanted to add is, when I was doing the math, I had to get 210 bushel an acre, which isn't my average, but there's quite a possibility that we're not going to get the high yields just because in my area, we've been so dry, and that's what I think a lot of producers aren't taking into account, or they're going to step back. If we don't get the spring rains, then okay, if they have their nitrogen on, they'll go ahead and plant corn. But if they have those swing acres, they might go to beans.
So when you look across the board in the supply chain chaos and just what we're dealing with right now with inputs, what input have you seen on your farm that has increased in price the most? And Matt, I'll start with you.
I would say that the input price would be anhydrous. I think the worry about getting a hold of it is more with bean chemicals this year. That is a very big concern. I know a lot of folks that went to pick totes up and there was no totes to pick up. And so that is something that there's a fairly large concern across the board for. But there's no question that, we did a little bit of a study on nitrogen, for instance, and all fertilizer costs. In the fall of 20 in Illinois, a 250 and 250 DAP and potash program with 200 pounds actual in was running about $170 an acre. Prepay prices this past fall that April and I have talked about a little bit, we were running about 275 or so $100 an acre in excess. It wasn't much fun to pay for that, but the current at the end of fall it was running 4.25, and then right now you're looking at probably 460 to 500. And so it just put it in perspective, almost tripled the price of the same program from the fall of 20 till the spring of 22. So and anhydrous has definitely been one of the main catalysts there.
April, which input have you seen?
I agree with that. My fertilizer prices, but also glyphosate prices are crazy. Over $70, I think, for a gallon, where it was in the low 20s or below that. So, we're not just getting hit on one side with fertilizer. It's also the chemicals. And my chemical guy said they're going to be okay, but maybe they can get a 250 gallon tote, but a guy might only need 50 gallons. So, and they can't legally, repackage it. So what are they going to do? So that's the problem, is getting it in the right containers for the right people. And, that's what I'm hearing. And the prices are unbelievable. Anything with atrazine, they said, was going to be difficult.
Well, and my next question is going to be of that you've booked, how much do you actually have in your shed and secure and guaranteed that you actually are going to get it? So that's the next one. You two think about that.
Supposedly all of it.
Well, don't give it away. Brittan, for you though, what input have you seen in your area of Texas just increase the most compared to last spring?
Yeah, I don't think we're going to be much different than everybody else. The fertilizers, number one, nitrogen. There's a lot of liquid put out here. We have pretty easy access to it. But it's, our 5-year average on that's probably $180 to $210 a ton. And last price I got was around $615. So we've seen it triple just like everything else. It puts it over $1 a pound for nitrogen. So, and then the one that we're running into a little bit is Liberty. Is becoming a challenge from the cotton side of things. We do have some options with some different technologies there, but there's still some areas that you can't spray some of those, Enlist or some of those products. So we've been running Liberty in those areas, and we're having a hard time finding it. And if you do find it, it's got a price tag on it that kind of makes you think you'll change, either change seed genetics or do something different.
Do you think that is a serious thought right now heading into 2022, or do you think that's more for 2023?
I think 23 will be where that could really show up if something doesn't change there. So I hope guys got enough, to do what they need to do for 22. But if you were gonna try to switch something real fast or do that, I don't think that's gonna happen at this point.
And so, Brittan, in your area, you look at the drought yields. The yield picture's not great right now unless you get some rain. But when you look at these higher input prices, how much do you need your yields to increase to cover that cost?
You're probably looking at pretty easy 20% over APHs to cover the cost. And that's where drought really starts compounding is whenever you get a crop established, grow to the end, and then yields aren't there, and you've put a lot of these high inputs into that crop, and that's where guys I think could get in trouble this time around is if that's the case where we don't have great subsoil moisture any at all really, and so we're going to have to depend on rains through the season, which can be hit or miss, and that's a pretty big challenge in the Texas Panhandle. So it's going to take every bit of probably 20% to just cover the cost of that.
And Matt, you're in a different situation where you've had almost too much rain in some areas. I don't want to say too much because I know in the middle of the summer, you probably, if things turned off drier, you wouldn't be saying that. But when you look right now at the increase in the cost, and you're looking at, and you're talking to a lot of farmers right now, really looking at budgets and looking at balance sheets, yields like in Illinois, do you need to hit APH? Do you need to go above? Kind of what do you need right now in order to cover these added costs?
Yeah, I decided just to go ahead and pull up my numbers just to shed light for everyone on exactly what I'm looking at. And, for me personally, chemical costs are going to be up, but not substantially, whenever it comes to corn. I mean, I'm going to be looking at around $125 an acre for chemical and fungicide with application. And that's with a 2-pass program. So a fairly, I'm trying to have a foolproof program here still. And then fertility is going to run me about $335. So whereas I told you the prepay prices were around $275, as I suggested, we do have a couple of farms that are going to have some anhydrous this spring. First of all. Second of all, I tried to budget a little bit of extra in just in case we had the kind of wet spring that we've had the last several years. Quite frankly, these wet springs have been hard on us. We've really struggled. We don't get a half inch or an inch of rain anymore. We get 3 or 4 inches of rain, and we get 3 or 4 inches of rain, and then we lose our ponds. We lose nitrogen. And so, I always try to budget a little bit of additional cost for nitrogen, just in case we get some of those super heavy rains. And so with those types of cost factors, about 110, 115 bucks for seed. I mean, my break even using a 220 yield. Now, just so everyone understands, over all my farm, I'm just a shade under 220. So around 216 is what my APH would be for my farm. And so I'm not projecting anything vastly above that because I'm trying to stay conservative, but that gives me a break even 478. So $4.78, at a 220 yield. So obviously, whenever you're buying crop insurance. Now, that's another question. Crop insurance, obviously, not cheap this year. 85% for us for optional units, which means I'm going to protect on a field by field basis, not the whole farm, was around $72 an acre. Whereas enterprise units would be for you to protect your entire farm for corn, is running, half that or below. It was just around half that, but regardless, 72 bucks an acre, not a lot of guys are signing up for that, and gals. And so we decided to back off just a shade on our corn, especially whenever I'm looking at that break even price, quite a bit below the level of the current market. So, but yeah, 478 means that if I have a normal size crop, especially if prices are anywhere close to where we're at today, Tyne, I'm in really good shape. So yes, input costs are up, but we were very fortunate just to get them bought when we did.
Don't forget, if you have a question, I know we're talking a lot about planting, a lot about production and dryness and Mother Nature right now, but if you have any question for these farmers right now, just focusing on 2022, go ahead and write that in that Q&A down at the bottom right of the screen. Go ahead and send those questions in and we'll get them answered. Okay, I teased it a little bit ago, but you've booked your inputs. April, of the inputs that you booked, let's look at chemistries first, okay?
Mhm.
How much do you actually have in your shed and have 100% guarantee that you will get what you booked?
Well, I don't bring them in my shed. They're in the chemical guy's shed, but I just talked to him and I said that same thing. Is it there? And he said, yes, it's there. So yes, I have it. I know a lot of guys have gone and gotten it, but it's guaranteed there, and as Matt talked, I'm like, wow, that sounds like my farm. So, even though all these inputs are higher, and if we can get them, we're still in a good price situation where we're still, going to make money.
Yeah, if you grow a crop.
If the prices stay up here.
Yeah, if prices stay up, if you have decent yields, all of that.
So
And
everyone I've talked to, the chemicals are there. We can get them what I normally get. They said now, like in some other cases where if we have to change chemistry or change dealers, they might not be able to get it from their warehouse. So that's going to be the issue.
Yeah. So April, glyphosate, glufosinate, Enlist. What are you talking about right now when you say chemistries are there? What exactly are you referring to?
So Roundup, Extend. I'm Extend beans. So,
Okay.
And I'm due no-till, so I have to go burn down for my beans mostly. So yeah, that's what and Callisto, I do a lot of Callisto on my corn, but they said that's the one that might be hard to get, but they have it now. So, but if, there's more needed, we might have to look at changing it up. So.
And that's another thing, if somebody does have a wet spring and let's say there's some replant and there's some other things that, are the inputs the seed? Yes, but other inputs, are they there? So Brittan, where you are, where it is extremely dry in that area of Texas, of everything that you've booked input wise on the chemistry side, have you been guaranteed that you will receive those shipments?
No, we've actually had some. Our Roundup we're probably about a third that our suppliers are pretty much telling us we need to figure something out, which isn't a huge deal. It sounds terrible. But so we'll just switch up a few things, especially, corn's a little easier to do that on, and we'll move our Roundup towards our cotton acres and do some stuff like that. I think a lot of guys are going to do that. But yeah, we've had a few of those things that we booked or we thought we booked that we're not going to get. And I say that we could probably get them today. They're going to be twice or 2.5 times what we thought we booked them for. So we're going to kind of opt out of that and try to use what we have, in season and do some of that and kind of change some things up a little bit.
Well, and Brittan, I know a lot can change where you are. But when, we always talk about having a plan for the growing season at this point, knowing that you're only going to get a third of your, or the third may not be available of glyphosate, some other issues that you talked about with glufosinate. How many different plans right now do you have just in case, XYZ happens? I mean, do you have a plan A through F? Kind of what are you looking at right now of all your game plans, just because there are so many moving factors right now?
Yeah, we're probably A through about D at the moment, and hope we don't get that far down the list. But yeah, there's going to be a lot of moving targets here, especially April will determine a bunch. I think if we catch some rain in April, it's definitely going to change some things. If it stays dry like we are, there really won't be a whole lot change in that regard, just because our options pretty much our plans have been made for us, I guess, at that point.
Yeah. And Brittany, somebody's asking, what if plan B is not available? And I know you said you have through plan D, but even then, are those supplies guaranteed? This year you can't take anything as a guarantee. So what if plan B isn't available?
Yeah, that's it's a concern, because you think you can just shift gears and change and go the other direction. I think for us, the bulk of our acres are in plan A. If plan B doesn't work, then C is going to be less than ideal, but at least it's not a huge chunk of our acreage. And I think most guys will be in that camp a little bit. I think for the most part, everybody's going to try to stick with A, but if they do have to move to C for their sake, I hope it's kind of like us, maybe not a huge percentage of what they do. And that's kind of where we're at too. We're going to try to do as much as we can, like we always have, and try to stick there. But yeah, that's kind of our plan right now.
Matt, on the chem side, do you have everything secure, everything that is confirmed? You are going to get everything that you put on the books this year?
Yes, that's what we've been told. I don't do my own spraying. Quite frankly, I don't have time to do my own spraying. So that's been a discussion over the years. My dad used to, and then my mom told my dad he wasn't going to spray anymore, so he quit spraying. So that was back in the old dual days, and I think he had some skin discoloration issues that popped up, and she made the decision for him. Things are different nowadays. I do believe that as my son, as Bo, when he gets home, that's something we've discussed, but the retailer has them right now is what I've been told, and that we should be good to go. Everything was paid for a long time ago. A tough check to write, but I think that we've all learned here in the last year that whenever if you want to cry wolf, it probably wasn't a good year to try to do that. One thing that did spur my mind just a little bit when you were talking to April earlier, yes, it looks like we should all do quite well, but one thing, if you're not in production agriculture and you don't know the numbers that the three of us are looking at, you got to understand that we have more invested in this crop than we've ever put in a crop before. So if you do have some sort of a crop failure, and you're not talking 220 bushel corn, you've got so much risk on the table this year, more than you've ever had in your career, that it could be devastating, especially if you don't have a really good crop insurance backup, if you will, or some sort of a risk management plan. I don't want to delve into that too far. I just want to make sure we understand that you look at University of Illinois Farm Doc numbers, and they're saying that over $50 an acre more in this crop than we've ever put in a crop before. As far as corn's concerned, I believe their estimate is around $75, but regardless, it's a very expensive crop going in the ground. So if you do get in a dry scenario where Brittan doesn't start getting rain and that drought continues to move north and east, like it did in 12, quite frankly, those drought monitor maps look very similar. In fact, 22 looks worse than 12 at the present time still. If that would happen to creep to the north and east, you're looking at a really tough situation, especially if the crop insurance, if you're not adequately prepared with that.
April, I see you shaking your head there.
Yeah.
I mean, is that when you look at the amount of risk that you're taking on this year, just with input prices? Yes, commodity prices are better than they were, but someone like you, is that your biggest concern right now, is just the risk of if commodity
that's
prices?
what I've been telling. We're farming the margin now. We're not, yeah, our prices are great, but look at the inputs we have. And so you really have to take a look at your cost of production. I do the cheap insurance overall. My farm's within 2 miles of where I farm, so I'm very lucky. So if I'm going to get hit with something, it's going to be all my fields. So I'm lucky I get a cheaper insurance rate, but it's just, like Matt said, those checks we've had to write are a hard one. I'm bumping up against my line of credit already. I tried the quivering bottom lip with my banker and it didn't work. He said, no, suck it up, woman. And so sell some of that corn you have in the elevator, or empty a bin. So, and I think that's pretty universal around. When we made our line of credits, we were not expecting this to, last this long. So,
Well,
it's
and Brittan, when they
scary.
talk, they'll produce some crop, but I know we were in Southeast Colorado, and that farmer saying basically, if they do not get moisture on those dryland acres, there won't be a crop. Winter wheat abandonment's at 80% right now, and so these commodity prices are great if you have a crop to sell. But at this point, Brittan, how much of your crop are you even willing to forward contract, not knowing if or what you will produce?
Yeah, so like you say, 0 times the big price is still 0. So like winter wheat, we won't contract any besides irrigated type ground. We can do some stuff there. Same with corn, cotton. All our irrigated acres will be fairly aggressive in trying to take advantage of the prices. But from a dryland, non-irrigated standpoint, we're kind of going in with 0 because there's just we've bought out of contracts before in 2011 and 12, and nobody wants to do that. And so we'll probably go in on the dry land and all that with nothing hedged at this point, just because of the drought.
And before we go into a couple other questions that aren't production related, April, Matt, and Brittan, I'll start with you, Brittan, since you just finished, but field work, have you done any field work, any prep work for spring, or have you not gotten in the field at all at this point?
Yeah, no, we've had plenty of open weather to get it done. Unfortunately, like in some places, we've actually had to irrigate so we could do the field work. A lot of that going on. But we're predominantly kind of fall through the middle. We kind of work all winter long in the Texas Panhandle on our tillage and all that. So from that standpoint, I think most guys are where they need to be. We were talking about it earlier. I think there's been a little bit of forced tillage in the plains, guys trying to keep ground from blowing. So some of that's happening too. But I think for the most part, most guys are in pretty good shape there.
Yeah.
Yeah, we haven't done anything this spring. We're able to get everything done that we wanted to get done last fall. We even had some ground that we tiled last fall. We didn't know if we'd get a window to kind of work it after it was able to settle for 6 weeks. And we actually had a window there in December. We're able to get a little bit of that done, but we're in good shape. We're ready if it warms up and dries off a little bit. I would say 10 days from now, 2 weeks, if this rain keeps up, but 10 days to 2 weeks from now, I think there'll be people rolling if the forecast that I'm currently looking at ends up proving to be correct.
Okay, April, what about you?
Yep, I'm my corn on corn acres, I got deep rip last fall. That wasn't an issue since we're so dry. And I think Brittan needs to come up and visit the tundra sometime and see what frozen ground looks like. But no, that's all good. I just finished my bean ground in front of planting corn. And then, like I said, I no-till most of my soybeans. So, because I'm a one-woman show, so I gotta, be as efficient as I can.
April, just remember, you have trees that serve as a windbreak for those bone-chilling temperatures.
That's true.
Brittan doesn't have those trees, okay? So give or
Okay.
take, right, Brittan? When it's cold there's nothing to stop that wind.
Just a few fence posts.
And speaking of that, though, wildfires, there's been a lot of that in Texas. A lot of, I know some more wind dust storms that have come in. How's your area?
Yeah, we've experienced a little bit of everything. Right there close to Amarillo, they had some a few weeks ago, burnt some houses. Yesterday, there was some houses burned kind of in the eastern part of the Panhandle. So it's a real deal. There's a lot of volunteer fire departments right now are running through themselves trying to fight these fires on these days. You know, yesterday was sustained winds up in the 30s, 35, and then gusts in the 60s. And, you know, you get that for 12, 15 hours straight, and it starts taking a toll. So it's definitely a concern. Everybody's kind of on edge a little bit on those days. Try not to, you know, do anything, but it's getting to the point where it's time for a change.
And we know static electricity has been something that can just demolish a cotton crop. This year, hearing about some of it in wheat. So have you had that in wheat? And realistically, how much of that winter wheat do you think you'll see abandoned in your area this year?
Yeah, so I haven't seen it personally on my farm. I've seen some on, you know, just surrounding areas. You drive by and you can see where the dirt's been moving across it, and the static electricity's, you know, taking its toll. We actually still have a lot of wheat that was planted late October, November that hadn't come out of the ground. And I mean, at this point, it's not going to. So some of those acres are starting to get released. Insurance is releasing those acres, and guys are going to go ahead and take them out. But I would probably say in my little neck of the woods, I wouldn't think there's more than about maybe 10% of that as of right now. Now we go another 30 days, and I think that number could grow to 50 or 60% real fast. We're right on the threshold. If something doesn't happen in the next 15 to 20 days, those acres will go up substantially here pretty shortly.
Yeah, I talked to USDA meteorologist Brad Rippey this morning, and he said with this La Nina pattern, just going to kind of stay in this pattern. So things don't look promising, unfortunately, for areas like you and some of the plains. Jim asking, did price increase on your input, that price increase creep, did that prompt you to buy chemicals earlier than normal, Matt?
Yeah, I would say, you know, essentially what happened is last year when we were prepaying fertilizer, we had the discussion with the retailer, hey, when do we need to start locking stuff in for next spring? Like, do you need money now? And it's not that I just had money to burn. It's just this situation has caused people to readjust their mindset, and it should. I mean, you know, there's serious fear with some people, and there should be about, am I going to get what I need to raise a crop? I mean, heck yes, you want to raise a crop. You got 650 corn sitting here staring you in the face, but if you can't get all the inputs, you're up a creek. And so, what we had the conversation actually in August. And we were told that they would need the money, you know, in a typical prepay time period. But if they needed it before the end of the year, or if we needed some prepaid expenses, quite frankly, that we could do something in November and December. And we had that conversation again after harvest. And, you know, we ended up finding out that they didn't need the money until January, and they would still be able to lock everything in. There's no question, though, that some folks, in my opinion, still waited in January for some of these prepay levels. They thought maybe they would get some relief, especially on anhydrous. And unfortunately, that just hasn't been the case.
April, did it prompt you to buy chemicals earlier than normal? And then also on the flip side of that, is there anything that you couldn't buy earlier than normal because they couldn't guarantee it?
No, I had the same discussion with my chemical guy in August when I prepaid nitrogen, and he said, no, it'll be January. And quite frankly, they didn't even have a price until then. They couldn't price it till then. So that's when I normally prepay for all the chemicals then. And, you know, then we had the conversation. He said, we might only get 2/3 of what you need. So we'll look at different things. So we did that, but then just recently talking to him, I got everything I needed. So I didn't have to go to plan B, Brittan. I just stayed with A so far. So, you know, but yeah, it sounds very similar to Matt.
Yeah, a lot can change when you're not in the field yet either. So something to keep in mind. But Brittan, for you, you know, what could you try to buy earlier than normal?
Yeah, we tried kind of like everybody. August, we started trying to get some of our Roundup and some pre-emerges for corn, you know, milo acres that we use across a large part of the farm. Some of those things for cotton, stuff like that. And at the time, I think everybody was a little slow thinking, we got time and maybe things will change. And so what we did get done then is kind of what we have. And then everything else, the prices kind of got crazy. But from a fertilizer standpoint, we typically buy a lot of our fertilizer August, September, and store it. We store liquid. And so we were trying to get that done. That was right about the time some of the hurricanes came through Louisiana. A lot of the fertilizer dealers, it kind of just went cold. Nobody give you a price. Nobody was really willing to stick their neck out there. So, we thought we were getting stuff locked in, and then 2 weeks later it was, hey, you got 5% of that. The new price is this. How much of that do you want? And so we kind of did a lot of that through the fall. And every time we talked, it was just, going up $100 a ton out of whack. So we tried all we could, but there was a lot of factors in there and made it really hard to source some of that stuff, especially like the nitrogen, like we usually like to.
We'll go through this next question pretty quickly because I want to get to the couple other questions that have rolled in. But we started covering the input issues last spring. There was a lot of talk about that. So it's not like you went into it blind. You knew that there could possibly be issues with fertilizer, be issues with some chemistries. But what are some of those things around the farm that you didn't think you would have issues getting in for spring planting that now you're facing some hurdles? I've heard tires. Tires are really hard to get in right now, but what are some of those other things on the farm that you just didn't plan for because you didn't think were going to be an issue? April?
Parts. I mean, and that's not just this spring. That was last fall. I got to go on a lovely 5-hour road trip to Northern Iowa and then up to Minnesota just for combine parts. And I had to put 2 back tires on my combine, which was a fun check to write. And they had to come from northern Minnesota somewhere. So yeah, so I was lucky to find them and get them, but oh my goodness, that check was fun to write too. But parts, and my parts guy talked to him and he said, yeah, it's going to be the same. They're going to be, we will be able to get the normal stuff, but heaven help us if something different, goes, I might get to go on another scenic road trip if something bad happens to the planter or tractor.
Brittan, is there anything surprising on your end that you just haven't been able to get like you thought you would?
We've been able to get everything. It's been real slow and a little, scary at times. I think tires, everybody's fighting that. We do a lot of pivot irrigation, so we have a lot of sprinkler tires. Those have been really hard to find. Semi tires, for your trucks, just stuff like that. Some of the stuff we've run into from equipment standpoint is our local, like John Deere dealers. We had some barrels on the back of our tractor for your hydraulic, your SCVs, and they're swapping parts between dealerships now, trying to ease the pain a little bit because they can't get them within a month or whatever. So if a dealership in Kansas has them and they're willing to let them go, then they'll ship them down. So we're seeing a lot of stuff like that I've never seen done before. And so far, I think it's kind of got everybody through to this point. But at some point when that dries up, I'm pretty concerned that it could get pretty limited on parts and things if that happens.
Yeah, Brittan, we did see, at harvest, some combines shut down waiting on parts. And so delays were, a lot longer than you wanted it to be because of parts. Who knows what's going to happen in planting as well when it comes to that? Could we see some planting delays just because of breakdowns and issue of parts? But Matt, real quick, is there anything that you have tried to order that you were just surprised that you couldn't get?
Yeah, we ordered an update kit for our planter last May, for down pressure and the whole works. And, I'm not going to talk obviously brands or anything because it's not brand specific. Everyone's having the same sort of struggles, but with the people that we had ordered it from, it was supposed to be built and delivered to us by mid-January. And we're not going to get to use it this spring. I mean, we've already been told that if we get it, it's going to be maybe by the end of April. But they've been really good working with us on, this is what we're going to do to try to make it better. One thing I'll say is that the reason we did it last May is because there was going to be a price increase coming June 1st. That did happen. There was another one September 1st. And we bought that update kit significantly cheaper than what we can buy it today. We just don't have it yet.
Yeah, and you're not alone when it comes to that, whether it be an upgrade kit or sprayers, planters,
Parts.
tractors, things like that for sure. Okay, April, real quick, are you aware of carbon contracts having an impact on what crop to plant?
No. Well, first of all, I want to say I was really glad Matt didn't say he couldn't get his channel seed. I was worried he was going to say that, but
Seed hasn't been an issue this year from what I've heard. Seed
no,
hasn't
and
been
that's
something that
I
hasn't.
talked to my, seed, and they didn't go up that much either. So I was really shocked. But no, I have not heard that at all. You know, maybe the other guys have, but they're not big in my area. Not a lot of guys are doing them. And for me, especially, I've been no-tilling for 20 years and you know, so what they're wanting people to do, I'm already doing. So
Yeah, and you don't qualify for those programs because you're not
Exactly.
implementing something new.
Exactly.
Matt, what about you?
No, I haven't heard much about that. Only thing I want to say about it is that carbon contracts, I've been encouraging people to be super cautious about reading through it and having your lawyer look at it as well, because there's some language in some of these that I've come across that I guess locked people in maybe a little longer than what they thought. And so just be really careful with these. I think they're a good thing if someone like April could get paid one of these days to do what she's already doing. It's just a matter of be careful with it.
Yeah, sounds like a healthy amount of skepticism when it comes to entering some long-term contract like that. But Brittan, what about you? I mean, your area, a lot of times, what you want to do and what you can do because of Mother Nature are two different things.
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of talk about it. Been to a few meetings and different things. I haven't really heard of any action being taken in this area. And so no real changes because of those yet. So.
Okay. Another question came in, if you're comfortable talking about it. How much of your 2022 crop have you sold or contracted? And Brittan, I mean, I'll start with you. We talked about it. It's hard to forward contract when you don't even know if you're going to have a crop, you know, how much of a crop you are going to grow this year. Have you forward contracted anything at this point?
Yeah. So like I said, we still have some irrigated ground that we can do some of that. And from that standpoint, we're about 2/3 contracted there. On our non-irrigated ground, I guess we may be 100% contracted and don't even know it yet. So, but yeah, where we can kind of guarantee, you know, what we're growing, like I said, we're about 2/3.
And you say all of this with a smile on your face. You are a glass half full individual, Brittan. April, what about you?
I'm a lot less than Matt Bennett would want me to be, because I'm like Matt's dad, where, you know, I'm on the downhill side. So probably 20%. And normally I'm far more than that, but heading into, like I said, a third drought year and having the worst corn I've ever had last year kind of scares me a little bit. So, and quite frankly, the basis I have for the bean bid I have at where the crushing facility, they're $1 over. That's ridiculous, you know, or $1 under. I'm sorry, not $1 over. It's $1 under, and I've never seen it more than 20. So I'm not really excited about doing anything there.
Matt,
So,
I know you could go on for 5 minutes on this topic, but don't, okay? Because we don't have that much time.
5.
Yeah, but what are you, I mean, when you look at booking input prices this high, what are you suggesting farmers lock in as far as percentage of forward contracting their crops?
Okay, my personal opinion is with you this far above crop insurance prices, getting a floor under some of these prices makes sense, but be really careful, especially with those of us that don't have irrigation as a backup, if you will. Be really careful to get to where you're like Brittan said earlier, oversold. Don't be in the situation we got in 2012 where we couldn't raise the bushels that we sold, because if you're buying them back for $2 and $3 and $4 a bushel more than what you sold them for, that's a bad situation. I'm about 30% either sold or protected on corn. Beans, we've actually pushed that some, but you know, with beans, we've only got 20% of the beans sold. We've got 30% of our crop though with a floor under it. And so we felt like when you were getting up above, you know, $14.50, $15, it's just really hard for us not to get something at least locked in on a floor.
Okay, so let's wrap up. What do you see as your biggest risk this year where you are? And what do you see as your biggest opportunity? Okay, Brittan, I'll start with you to wrap it up.
Our biggest risk right now is obviously the weather playing a huge factor. And then, you know, if things were to settle out in Russia, Ukraine, lot of risk premium comes out of the market. And then the Midwest go and raise a record crop or something like that. And then we're looking at extremely high input prices and, cheap commodities rolling into 23. That's probably our biggest concern right now.
Yeah, definitely. Matt?
I'd say something similar. So if you're the person that doesn't raise the crop and everyone else does raise the crop, and you've got a huge amount of money invested in it, but yet you don't have a fall price on your insurance that covers your rear end like it did in 2012, that's a major concern. What are the best opportunities? If we raise a crop this year, there's so many opportunities right now to lock in a really good worst case scenario. And so we could see a really good income year again right after 2021, which for most producers was the most profitable year they ever had.
Yeah, for most producers. April, I know you didn't have great corn yields last year, but
No, I didn't, but I still made good money because of the prices. So, I would echo them. Biggest concern is weather in my area, drought, not Texas drought, but, and thing I'm most excited about is these prices, but protecting yourself early, cover my costs, and then hope for the best.
Brittan, would you say there's more uncertainty right now this year than you had at the height of the trade war?
Yeah, I think so for sure for us. Yeah.
Matt?
Oh yeah. I mean, I think there's a ton of uncertainty, and I think that it's something that the one nice thing though, Tyne, once again, is looking at where prices are at. It's given opportunity for a producer to lock in worst case scenarios without extending themselves on physical bushels. So yes, there's a lot of uncertainty, but uncertainty gives you possibilities at the same time.
Oh, look at you. Quote. April?
Wish I had something like that to come back with, but 100% agree. The war is really thrown a wrench into everything what we're used to. And this is gonna disrupt all sorts of disruptions as far as trade and things like that. So, with that risk comes the opportunities. Where they'll come from, who knows? Luckily, we have very diverse places we sell our crops, and especially corn and soybeans, and we use a lot of it domestically. So we're very lucky. So, and I may be looking for a wheat. I want to know where I can, everyone says I need to raise wheat, but we don't do that in Iowa, or, well, some of you Illinois people do that, but they say that's the thing to go to. So who knows?
I'll give you Brittan's contact information, and he can be your wheat whisperer.
Might be a long ways to truck it, but yeah.
He can give you some advice. Well, thank you all for joining us. As they talked about, there is just a tremendous amount of uncertainty. There is some optimism when it comes to commodity prices, but we really want to mention that our thoughts are with farmers in Ukraine. I can't imagine what it would be like preparing to plant as you're so concerned about what's happening with the war as well. So just want to mention that, yes, it is definitely something that the world is keeping an eye on, but our thoughts are with farmers in Ukraine as they battle this this spring. So thank you so much for attending our Farm Country update. We will get some of this online, but be sure to check out the latest planting news and the results of tomorrow's USDA Prospective Plantings Report. What did farmers say that they were planting? I mean, we have these three farmers' perspective, but overall, what did farmers say? We'll cover that. That coverage will be tomorrow on agweb.com. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.